Hi again, everybody. Today I'd like to explain some of the things that are used by the priest at Mass to celebrate the sacrifice. So I've brought out the chalice here to show you the things that he uses for the Eucharistic part of the Mass. So the first is this piece of linen here on top, which is folded into 9 squares. So hopefully you can see that okay. There's a few neat things about this. It's called the corporal, and as far back as we can tell, it has always been directed to be made out of linen because the burial cloth of Jesus was made out of linen. And so the corporal, used at Mass as this sheet that holds the body of Jesus in the Eucharist, bears that connection with the original burial cloth of Jesus, which is also why this cloth is called the corporal, because it has to do with the body. So even in English, we say something is corporeal if it's bodily. So too, this is called the corporal because it's the sheet or the cloth that holds the body of Jesus. So pretty neat. Then we have the pall, and actually this one has the IHS, the 3 Greek letters for Jesus or Jesus that we talked about the other day. So pall just means a covering. So here we go. So its practical use is to cover the chalice to keep out anything that's floating around or flying around. Practical use against bugs can be crucial sometimes. So it's used as the covering for the precious blood in the chalice. And what's neat about the pall is, so its function is a covering, but we use the same word, pall, for the covering of a casket. And the pall covers the casket in which someone who is deceased is lying. So too here, the pall covers Jesus in the Eucharist. Now Jesus in the Eucharist is alive, right? Because it's by the power of his resurrection that the priest can make present the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus on the altar. However, Jesus' death is symbolized sacramentally. So we have the consecration of the bread into his body, separate from the consecration of the blood or of the wine into his blood. And of course, when body and blood are separated, you have death. So the way we do the consecration at Mass symbolizes the death of Jesus, even though, of course, he's alive, he's resurrected. But we have the pall covering the precious blood, and so there's that tie-in between the death of Jesus and a pall covering the deceased one that harkens to the same thing we do in a funeral. Okay, let's see. So those are 2 of the 3 cloths. Then this third one is a longer, narrower one that's just called the purificator and is used to purify the chalice and the paten at Mass. Then we have the paten, which is where the host is laid. And the paten is just the Latin, and then in Septuagint languages, word for plate. So it's just, it sounds fancy to us, but originally it just meant plate. And then finally, we have the chalice. And actually, I wanted to show you this. I forgot to mention this the other day. But we have the 4 winged creatures, as I showed you the other day. Well, one confirmation that they are representing the 4 evangelists is that each one is holding a book. So I think that's the lion, has a book there. The eagle is holding a book in its talons. The man here is holding a book. Oh, this is the lion. The other one must have been the bull. The lion here is holding a book. So, even if you didn't know that the lions were connected with the book of Revelation and pictured with the evangelist, you'd still say, there's some connection here between these 4 creatures and a writer and people who wrote. Okay, where was I? The chalice. The chalice, right. So there you have the chalice used to hold the precious blood. And just one quick thought here is that sometimes people say, I'm sure Jesus used something very simple at the Last Supper. I'm sure he used something, wooden or clay or pottery or something like that. And I always think, maybe, I mean, he wasn't rich, we know that, but it was the Passover. He was celebrating the high point of the Jewish liturgical year. So even if he didn't own what he was using, and it was the property of the man of the upper room that they rent, basically, it might have been something quite nice. It probably would have been the nicest thing that the person could offer. So I think, in any case, the chalice might not be so different from what Jesus used. But in any case, the same principle applies, that we use the best that we can provide for the most important thing in our lives, namely the celebration of the Mass, or the commemoration of the death and resurrection of Jesus, and for this amazing mystery of receiving and being able to have this sacrament of Jesus' own body and blood.